Welcome all to this morning's most exciting session called the She Revolution in Law, Women, Law and Social Change, with a fascinating name and a fascinating panel from across the world. We meet today, this morning. We have with us from Bhutan, Professor Sangay Dorjee. Please correct me if I say names or the names of the universities incorrectly. Indians have this habit of assuming that we actually, like the Americans, know everything. So Dean of Law School of Jigme, Singye, Wangchuk, School of Law, Bhutan. We have with us from Australia, across the continents, Professor Trish Mundy. Is that correct? Dean, School of Law, University of Wollongong, Australia. Then we have from South Africa, Professor Managay Reddi. She heads the School of Law in University of KwaZulu-Natal. And lastly, we have Professor Donna from Canada, from Lincoln Alexander School of Law. These are all from different... I am relieved to have said the names of the universities and of my panelists almost correctly. And that was a test of being a true world citizen. So I welcome all of you to this session. Since the name is given by Professor Srijit, and which I thought was an exciting name, Professor Srijit is the Executive Director, Executive Dean of JGLS. I am Professor Sameena Dalwai from JGLS. So we are from these 5 countries sitting here together to discuss how women are faring in the current world of law. To begin this theme, I would like to state just 2 points, that we are actually living in a very hopeful era when we believe that we are surrounded by very capable, very dynamic young women. Especially in our students, we see that the girl students actually ace the class, they are taking the judicial exams, they are doing all kinds of social activities, cultural activities. So they are actually at the forefront of their lives. But then we don't actually see that percolating always. When they enter the professional lives and 10 years down the line, we see that men have taken over. So what happens in these 10 to 15 years of professional life? People have written materials that point to both push factors, pull factors being discrimination, sexual harassment, belittling, mansplaining in the professional zones. Pull factors are family, children, responsibilities at home. There is also interesting material that says that cultural acceptance of women leaving jobs and job markets also in the long run become a disadvantage to women. Though while in the short run, it may feel like they are expanding their choices, that they can leave a job, stay at home, but in the long run, they are accepted as homemakers, and that doesn't actually help them in both their spheres. So all of these factors come in. On the other hand, material shows us in the last 10 years or so that employers prefer women. In the global law firms in India, there is material that shows that actually clients and corporates prefer women because they seem to be very serious. They seem to take their clients seriously. They also have better human relationships. So all of that actually points to a lot of hope. In an article in 1987, Munkle Meadow asked us whether women's entry into a legal profession, but we could actually use this, apply this to other professions as well, to a political sphere, to the social sphere, whether women's entry into all of this feminizes the profession, whether it actually puts into the profession the care, empathy, the feminine virtue, feminine value systems, And does that actually change the profession itself? It also asks questions about whether the whole system itself, law itself, tends to change because of this, how law operates, how, so there is a lot of material on how feminist legal theory, on how legal, letter of law itself, the practice of law, how they are male, how the perspective is male, how the natural is the man and the unnatural or the other is the woman. Does all of this change because women have entered the fora? So with all of these questions in mind, we will go to this fascinating panel of ours. I want to begin with Trish Mundy and the question. Each of our panelists have 5 to 7 minutes to answer the questions. And the first question to our panelists is, and I am hoping that while the questions are more to the point, our panelists will bring their experiences from their own law schools, from their own country and region, and enrich our experience here today. So to Professor Mundy, how has the world altered due to women's larger role in legal and political world?
Thank you so much, Sameena, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this wonderful panel. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I guess for me, in terms of this big picture question, I'd probably want to talk about 2 points that are connected for me. So first of all, from a global perspective, I think it's hard to go past issues of sexual, domestic and family violence as key areas where I believe women are making really powerful changes and demanding legal and political transformation. So while the cultural context in which violence against women is experienced may be different in different parts of the world, there's a universality to gendered violence, I think, that we all share. So through sharing lived experiences, women have been advocating social, cultural and legal changes that really seek to, I think, shift the focus from victim blaming and shaming to really looking to hold perpetrators to account one way or the other. And so we've seen that through the Me Too movement, you know, the everyday sexism hashtag movement, Time's Up, Orange, Orange the World, marking 16 days of gender violence. And in Australia, particularly a really powerful hashtag Let Her Speak movement, making really critical changes. And so for me, I think that is something that is really striking to me and speaks very much to my own area of interest. But connected to that and touching on what you said, Sameena, connected to this is women's growing presence in the worldwide legal profession and their contributions in advancing social justice and law reform in areas that affect women, like sexual and domestic violence. So in Australia, like many other countries, we have around 65% of people studying law are women. And just this year, we hit the 50% equal participation of women within the practicing profession, which was terrific. But we also know from studies undertaken in Australia that women law students are more likely to study law because they have an interest in social justice and actually an interest in advancing social change. And I suspect that that's really a wider global experience as well. So what we're actually seeing in my experience is women law students and lawyers using their knowledge, their skills and their lived experience to actually put on the agenda in their working life and in their lives, giving voice to marginalised women, to issues that are marginalised, agitating for change on issues that affect women. and particularly advocating for cultural change within the legal profession, because as you said, change is slow and there are many cultural issues within the legal profession that are preventing women from entering leadership roles, to a whole range of, toxic culture within the legal profession. So for me, your question around, are women changing the legal profession? Do they bring a different, do they bring difference to the legal profession? What I certainly see is that right now there is this widespread movement for change. There's a demand for change. And certainly what women are bringing as they are increasing in numbers in the legal profession is bringing a different perspective on issues that affect women and affect themselves. And they're living that through their work and through the profession, through law reform, etc. So for me, I think they're probably two key ways I think that I connect with.
Trish, do you think the she revolution that we have named this panel, is it a reality or is it just a hopeful, futuristic term?
Yeah, I've thought about that. And to be honest, I actually think that it's both of those things. I think that it is a reality in that I'm seeing in my own country and worldwide an inevitable demand and revolution for change, but not only because women are demanding it, but and demanding a dismantling of toxic patriarchy, but that it serves us all. It limits women and it limits men, and so I think that it is inevitable in my sense, in my view, that we will see this change. But I also feel that until we actually get there, because the journey is hard and the journey is slow, it's also a hopeful frame as well. So I think I'd have to say both of those things.
Thank you, Trish. And we'll come back when the session opens for question and answer. Thank you so much to Professor Dorjee, since he's the only token man on our panel. The question is whether this generally happens to women, right? On all panels, there is one token woman. So today you are in the position of a woman, Professor Dorjee.
That's right.
And what are the tangible changes that you see today? What do we witness today? What are the examples that you can give from your own jurisdiction?
Thank you very much, Sameena. I think you're right. I like to be, it's quite a, I'm happy to be on this panel. And the topic is very exciting because the theme is exciting. And also actually to be representing Bhutan on this and on this summit and speak a bit, although I'm not a specialist on this topic. But definitely, I think the opportunity to speak from my own experience, from what I see and what I hear, definitely. So first of all, probably I will like to congratulate the Global Jindal Law School and the university for organizing this summit. And as you know, as I was mentioning just before the session started, I was just catching up with Trish, Managay, and Donna that, Bhutan has, for the first time, a law school, and I personally feel that this in itself is a big achievement, actually, to have a law school, the first and the only law school in the country, and I happen to be the founding being, although I do not possess the legal qualification, but we started work in 2013, and we have now a law school up and running, and waiting to graduate our first qualified lawyers next year. And then the other thing is that probably when you look at legal education, I think as a non-legal, it also gives me the opportunity to look at legal education from a non-legal perspective. And And, probably thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak from Bhutan's perspective. I know my three other distinguished panel members will definitely make up for my shortcomings in terms of the knowledge on the topic and the subject matter. And therefore, with this statement, I'm sure the participants will definitely be able to manage the expectations from me. And, probably, I think it would be good to introduce this small law school to also the audience and the panel members here. The new law school, which we opened our doors to the first 25 students, happened in 2017 and by a royal charter. And we call it the JSW Law in short. And it is named after the fourth king of Bhutan to honor his visionary and glorious 34 years of reign. And as you can see in my background, I tried to put this on the, this is the permanent law school campus that is almost nearing completion in the western side of the country, to the west of the capital city where I'm right now here. And we're going to move there next year. And as you know, I think the biggest changes that came in the last few years is that His Majesty, the fourth king, gifted the country with the first constitution and ushered the country from an absolute monarchy to a democratic constitutional monarchy in 2008. And of course, he abdicated his throne in favor of his son before his retirement age of 65 years, which is again is very important to us. So, and then, as I mentioned, go back. So the introduction of the founding of the law school, with the first class of our students, 25 students, into our 5 years indivisible bachelors of law and postgraduate diploma in national law in 2017. And out of the 25, we have, you'll be glad to know that 13 are female. And as of 2021, this year, our student strength touched 108 and distributed across the 5 cohorts or classes. And again, 70% of them are female. So that is something that is really exciting.
Professor Dorjee,
yes.
Will you be able to comment then on the future of these female students in the legal profession in Bhutan?
Yes, absolutely. And I was just going to touch on the number of female in our in the civil service and the judiciary. And I think over the period of, so we will see that in the next 5 years at least, we will be contributing about 50 qualified lawyers joining the legal profession in the country. And that will definitely increase the capacity of our, judiciary and the practicing lawyers right now. And I feel that this is going to be really, really impactful role that the law school would have played. And even with the education that we have at the law school, we have what we call the clinics. And we are also these women and our boys also go out and work with live clients. And they have already been making very impactful making impacts on the lives of the people who are actually out there, through the in partnership with the various agencies, mainly CSOs. So I think in terms of the impact, some of them will join definitely the civil service. Most of them definitely will join the legal profession. And we see that Bhutan currently has not many number of lawyers and judges. And we see that, our graduates will definitely be playing a very, very big role in the access to justice, and also in equalizing the opportunities that are there for both men and women. So
you have a very beautiful campus picture. We all want to come and visit. I echo, I'm sure, the feeling of all of us, and JGLS definitely loves to make connections with law schools abroad. So I'm sure Professor Siraj Kumar and Professor Shrijit, and I hope they will take all of us with them. So we will hopefully soon go to Bhutan and visit your beautiful law campus. I will move to Professor Donna Young. Thank you so much, Professor Dorjee. And to Professor Young, my question is, what are the frustrations of our times? What remains unchanged, which ought to have been part of the real transformation that has not yet happened? And what has gone worse in this march towards the she revolution?
Thank you, Sameena, and I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this conference. I'm going to get to the kind of the negative things, but I do want to reiterate that a lot of positive has happened. So like my distinguished panelist, Dean Dorjee, I'm also the founding dean of the newest law school in Canada. This law school is really quite different, not only in the curriculum, but also in its makeup. So we have around 65% of our students are women, 80% of our senior administration are women. The majority of our faculty are women. In Ontario, in Canada, 6 out of 8 of the law deans are women. So there have been enormous changes. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from Toronto, which is on the land of the Dish with One Spoon territory, which is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. And I do think that it is important to acknowledge these as Canada is going through a reckoning with its Indigenous people. And part of what our law school is going to do and is meant to do is to reconcile our history of oppression and colonization over Indigenous people and bring that into the curriculum. That's just one example of what we're trying to do new or different at our law school. But I wanted to talk about a little bit about how I come to this topic. So I'm Canadian. I grew up in Canada. I went to law school in Canada, but I spent most of my legal career as a law professor in the United States. And so my expertise is in anti-discrimination law in the United States. And that anti-discrimination law really kind of proliferated in the United States in the 1960s. Constitutional law was developed over time from the 1940s. And the United States became a bit of a model for its anti-discrimination framework for a lot of countries in the rest of the world. But it was very clear by the 1980s or so, starting in the 1980s, probably a little bit before, that the anti-discrimination model in the United States was lacking in many ways because there wasn't this kind of recognition of systemic discrimination, systemic gender discrimination. And there was no way to legally deal with systems of discrimination. The legal system only deals with individuals who have been deemed to be the wrongdoers and individual victims. And so what we have is we've got the systems that are still intact, and we've got a legal system that really only attacks issues of discrimination in a piecemeal fashion where the systems continue to be intact. So this is where, unfortunately, we're not where we should be, especially in the legal profession. Even though we're making gains, I think all of our law schools are making gains in that we are bringing in more female students, more female faculty members, but we still have a legal system that is really quite conservative and quite discriminatory. So, for example, in Canada, we have a lot of discrimination that still exists in law firms and employment in general. Lots of sexual harassment. So the Me Too movement has, and before the Me Too movement, right, in the United States anyway, there was Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill, which popularized the concept of sexual harassment and made it understandable to the public. But we still have rampant sexual harassment in areas where men outnumber women. We also have a significant pay gap, a gendered pay gap in the legal profession. So equity partners in our biggest law firms make 25% more if you are a man, right, equity partners, than female equity partners. We have a lot of studies that suggest that in-house counsel in Canada, women are making on average $20,000 less per year than their male counterparts. We have gender segregation within law firms, right? So we've got the pink collar jobs. Those are the secretarial staff, the support staff, the receptionists. Tend to be mostly women. The lawyers tend to be mostly men. And then this gender pay gap, of course, is felt differently depending on whether you're a racialized woman, your income status, whether you're an Indigenous woman. So we've got a long way to go. We're still seeing a lot of effects. With all of this, discrimination continues to be rampant. And I suppose, what has gone worse? That's the last part of the question. What has gone worse? Well, COVID. I mean, we're already talking about structural systemic barriers to equality, rampant discrimination, sexual harassment. We don't see the same kind of the same kind of outcomes that we should be expecting by now. And then we have COVID forcing women into the homes where they are being subjected to increased domestic violence, increased isolation, increased mental health conditions, and also increased childcare responsibilities. We see a vast majority of the people who dropped out of the market during COVID, they were women. They dropped out the market to take care of the children that were at home. So we've got some very strict gendered roles within the family and society that are playing out in the marketplace.
Professor Young, when I'm in my class and I teach caste, gender, and the law, and so race compares to some extent to caste. And then I say to them that my subjects are training you or basically making you aware, opening your minds to all of these possibilities that exist, the discrimination that exists. And so I am hopeful that when you become judges and when you become lawyers in next 10 years, when I am at my ripe old age of whatever, I will see a new India. Do you feel that about your efforts that you're putting now, that you are doing all this to see something different and that you will possibly?
Yes. I mean, the reason I took this job, because I love being a professor. I love doing what I was doing, and starting a new law school from scratch is almost impossible, but it is thriving. We're doing well. But the reason I did this was because this law school there are a lot of advantages about building a law school from the ground up without some of the historical baggage that's there. So you can build a law school with a particular vision in mind. And one of the founding visions of the law school that I'm heading right now is this abiding optimism that we can change the legal profession, that it is our responsibility to change the legal profession, as we are the gateway into the legal profession. All students who practice law have to go through law schools. So we are trying to do this really differently so that we can change not just the legal profession, but for the legal profession's responsibility to the public. So I do have an abiding optimism, even though I might not see it, right? But I have faith that our students are going to change the world. All of our students.
Thank you so much, Professor Young. My last question to my last panelist is, what methods and approaches of law can obtain just social outcomes such that women can attain their full constructive social potential? To Professor Reddi.
Thank you very much, Sameena, and thank you to your university for this opportunity. I think the question you raised actually raises a far more fundamental question about why does it matter whether women attain their full potential? And in seeking to answer that question, I'm going to give a pretty broad outlook on the situation that women find themselves in globally, although it's really inspiring to hear what both Trish and Donna have said about the situations in their own countries, because it looks to me like best practices that hopefully other emerging nations will be able to look to for guidance on how to achieve things with minimum pain, one hopes. But coming back to the question that you've posed, what we do know is that previously, the advancement of women was regarded as essential to outcomes such as economic development and growth. However, we've now all come to realize that the empowerment and autonomy of women and the improvement of their political, social, economic, and health status are critical goals in themselves. And this shift in realization reflects a very human rights approach to issues of concern to women. Now, we know that human rights speak in very broad terms about the fundamental entitlement of all human beings to live in dignity and in conditions of social justice. They therefore provide a platform to launch a set of demands founded on the individual's inherent worth as a human being. So human rights not only create entitlements for right holders, but they also create duties for countries. Consequently, governments are required to ensure the fulfillment of these rights by taking steps to enable rights holders to enjoy the human rights to which they are entitled. However, we often find that human rights are criticized, for instance, in my country, as Eurocentric Western values, which are not part of the culture of the country. I think this to some extent also exists in India. So what we find, however, is that this resort to culture as a reason to retain laws and practices that are harmful to women is widespread and overused. The argument that the call for gender equality results from Western domination, which does not respect cultural diversity, is flawed for so many different reasons. But a primary reason is that even though the conventional analysis of gender equality may have originated in the West, women are not equal to men in any Western culture that is known. Therefore, gender equality is not of the Western value. Equally true is the fact that the value of gender equality is not unknown in non-Western cultures. To credit the West with this norm would be to ignore that equality in all its diverse and dynamic manifestations exists as an ideal and partial reality in many parts of the world. So giving credit to the West for equality also marginalizes and insults the agency of indigenous movements of women for equality worldwide by creating the impression that their equality aspirations have been imposed on them. But regardless of their spurious nature, the criticisms of human rights, this kind of affects the approach to gender equality. Therefore, whilst there may be agreement that women and men should be provided with equal opportunities through policy programs that may focus on poverty alleviation or the equal access to health and education and opportunities for self-employment and economic empowerment, there still remains an unwillingness to adopt a coherent approach to gender-based discrimination in society. And Donna's touched on this quite extensively. There is thus also a failure to address complex problems about gender roles and relationships and the impact that these have in imposing disadvantages upon women because of their sex. Therefore, whilst there's no denying that progress has been made towards eradicating gender discrimination in various areas, for instance, more girls are going to school, fewer girls are forced into early marriage, more women are serving in parliament and positions of leadership, and laws are being reformed to advance gender equality, we find that the research reveals that a lot more still needs to be done. I'd like you to consider the following facts. An estimated 90% of countries, that's 155 out of 173, have legal provisions that discriminate against women. 30 countries still have laws that place men as the heads of households. 19 legally require wives to obey their husbands. 32 prohibit a woman from getting a passport without her husband's consent. 100 countries have legal restrictions on what types of jobs women can do. In 102 countries, laws or customary practices still deny women the same right to access land as men. About 35%, that's more than a third of the world's women, suffer from gender-based violence. Marital rape is not a crime in 32 countries, including India. In 18 countries, husbands can legally prevent their wives from working. And in 39 countries, daughters and sons don't have equal access to inheritance rights. And just one other statistic is that 1 in 5 women or girls have experienced physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner within the past 12 months. Yet 49 countries have no laws that specifically protect women from such violence. So the question is, as Donna has mentioned, conventional legal reforms continue to ignore gender inequalities. They tend to sideline the need to reform discriminatory personal laws, despite widespread recognition of substantial gender inequalities in this area. Whether intended or not, the reforms that we do have tend to promote adherence to discriminatory customary laws and traditions under the guise of supporting local laws or regulations. In other cases, we find that effective enforcement is difficult in the absence of secondary legislation, rules, and regulations to ensure that processes and resources are used appropriately. So what are the approaches that can be adopted to ensure just social outcomes for women to attain their full potential? In its 2012 report on gender equality and development, the World Bank suggests 4 priority areas to help policymakers understand and address problems associated with gender inequality. The first priority is reducing gender gaps in human capital, specifically female mortality and education. The second is improving female access to education and economic opportunities. The third is addressing women's underrepresentation in communities and political systems. And the final priority is understanding how gender inequality applies across generations. So fundamental to eradicating gender inequality and discrimination is the creation of gender-responsive laws and policies. And gender-responsive laws do several things. Firstly, they signal the state's commitment to gender equality and women's empowerment. They then create a framework for implementation and contribute to changes in social norms in favor of women and girls. And finally, they help to deter gender discrimination, to promote gender equality, and to foster the emergence of inclusive, equitable, and accountable institutions that are responsive to the needs of the wider population. So what forms must these gender-responsive laws take? In other words, what should their focus be? I suggest that the gender-responsive laws must be oriented towards establishing mechanisms for women's equal participation and equitable representation at all levels of the political process, society, and community public life. They must also serve to promote the fulfillment of women's potential through education, skills development, and employment, and give paramount importance to eliminating poverty, illiteracy, and ill health amongst women. The laws and policies must be aimed at eliminating all practices that discriminate against women and must assist them in establishing and realizing their rights, including those that relate to reproductive and sexual health. Moreover, appropriate measures should be adopted to improve women's ability to earn income beyond the traditional occupations and to achieve economic self-reliance and ensure their equal access to the labor market and social security systems. Included in the gender-responsive laws must be provisions for eliminating violence against women. The law must also eliminate discriminatory practices by employers against women, such as those based on proof of contraceptive use or pregnancy status. Through laws, regulations, and other appropriate measures, the legal provisions must also make it possible for women to combine the roles of childbearing, breastfeeding, and child rearing with participation in the workforce. So I just want to make one final comment, and that's in terms of Goal 5 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As of 2014, 143 countries have guaranteed equality between men and women in their constitutions, but 52, which is a hugely significant number, have yet to take any of the steps or many of the steps that I've listed above. I'd like to conclude with that comment. I'm willing to come back to this point if required. Thank you, Sameena.
Thank you so much, Professor Reddi. I wanted to ask a question to all of you. With the larger scenario being like this, when we all teach in the law school or deal with students, do you have one particular story to share? I write in newspapers because I feel as academics, what is the point if 5 people, other academics read my articles? So might as well write for my students, for the larger public. So I try to do this, making one point through a story, some intimate story, something that tells, pushes my point. But I don't have to say the point, the theoretical point, because that I write in my academic work. So is there one story of one student? Because Donna mentioned a lot of Aboriginal women students are joining. In each of our jurisdiction, we meet students, females, but also people who were hitherto kept outside of the legal profession. So do you have, so just putting it out there, if anyone could bring in something that that humanizes our the discourses that we do in feminism. Does it come back to us from one student somewhere? But the questions that have come to me from the audience, I'm going to pose them to you. One is, how important is the critical mass of women in leadership position to bring in the she revolution? And that could go to Trish, who began the discussion. And the second question is to Professor Dorjee, which is a very short question. Does Bhutan have laws that protect rights of working women? So maybe begin with Trish, please.
Yeah, thank you, Sameena. In terms of that question, how important is it that, as we see, to have more women in the profession to achieve the change? Look, it's an interesting conundrum, because on the one hand, the accepted position has always been that as we see more women enter the profession, we will see change in legal culture. And in fact, that has not proved true so far. And certainly that's the case in Australia, and I venture to guess UK and America, where increasingly we're seeing more women enter the profession than men, or at least in equal numbers. So there is something about legal culture that is proving incredibly intractable, and potentially it's in terms of law school. I mean, I love what Donna had said, that actually this is a law school that is trying to think differently about teaching law and setting legal culture, because I think that's what we all need to do, because legal culture will not change in and of itself, I don't believe, simply by having more women enter, because we internalize a whole lot of culture that actually doesn't serve us, and so I think it is necessary but not sufficient is my answer to that. And if I may just very quickly, following on from Managay, I just want to add something around, so clearly a gender lens to law and justice is really critical, but I want to just make the comment around intersectionality and the real importance of an intersectional focus, because we often live, our lived experience is often more complex than the binary of male, female, etc. And so we know that intersectionality increases vulnerability. We know that we experience oppression and disadvantage in multiple ways as women. So women of colour, lesbian women, women in disability. So I think my sense is that that increasingly, in terms of, students, we are seeing much more diverse students coming through, and students with difference in class, in disability, in, First Nations women. And we need, as both a legal profession and as, law and advancing social justice, to really have a much more intersectional lens. And so I just wanted to make that point. I absolutely, agree that many parts of the world, we are still talking about, gender equity, but I think really acknowledging the intersectional experience is really crucial. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Trish. Professor Dorjee.
Thank you, Sameena. I think thank you for that short question from whoever came. And Bhutan, as you know, it's a Buddhist country, and traditionally, much of the laws, as you may understand, has its origins in our traditions, really, unlike our Western counterparts. So because of our rich traditions, where actually based on the teachings of the Lord Buddha, there is no really distinction between male and female, and we see them as equal, the right and the left eye, basically, so the one doesn't function without the other. And just as I'm thankful to my mother for who I am right now, giving me this humanly, form. And, I'm surrounded by actually 6 important women in my life. The first one being my late mother, then my mother-in-law and my wife and my 2 adult daughters. And my boss is also a lady, a princess, and with a legal background, of course. So I really, I do not perceive much of an issue, really. And I think in terms of specific laws that really to empower women as such, I do not see one. But I think they are, what the parliament and the government is trying to do is actually trying to see where there are any laws that disadvantage women. And they're trying to create all those facilitating policies. One of which definitely I know is the last government 3 years ago or 4 years ago, they increased the maternity leave from 3 months to 6 months, 6 months. And the current government is again now pro-women, actually, in terms of, 1,000 days for a child, the mother, and then they increased the number of days for the paternity leave so that the father is there to support the mother and the child. And then, of course, the recent issues are, I think, rape related. And the parliament, everybody is trying to strengthen the, rape, the penal code, and then trying to really fix the culprits. And then, of course, in terms of the school education, no specific laws, but policies to encourage school. And if you look at the statistics in the schools, I think 52% of the high secondary school are women, actually girls. And the access to higher education used to be a problem quite 10 years ago. But I think now the access, just as you see in my law school, I think they are the top, they excel. And through the most robust selection process, I think I've been getting consistently high numbers of women in my law school. And, I'm confident that, so there is no laws, but except, of course, there are now, I hear some voices from some quarters, because I think there's a lot of influence from Me Too movements. They want big revolutionary demonstrations, not as such, but I think they want things to happen, but they want things to happen now in the most dramatic manner. But I always believe that we must be conscious of the changes that we need to make. And I am truly, as I said, I work with women most of my time, and I am very sensitive to their needs. And I have all the things that I do at the law school. It's very sensitive to the needs of my students and my faculty, 19 of them, 7 are women. And my job is to increase the number of faculty over the years with more women, if not equal. And consistently, of course, the same number of females. And I think rather than the dramatic changes that we see elsewhere with this and that, I like to believe in a very smooth and subtle transformations over the period of time, and which is much more actually sustained and a lasting impact. So I am sorry, I'm not able to actually pinpoint at specific laws as
No,
such.
I
But
think the question is answered. And
Yeah.
if I may add to what you said, from an intersectionality lens that Trish brought to us, but just to extend that, to look at the world from the Western point of view does not serve any purpose. Because then, as Catherine McKinnon herself was critiqued by Black feminist theorists, that it is not more to Black women, it's different. So to believe that actually US, Canada, Australia will lead the she revolution and then India and Bhutan will follow is actually almost a funny way of looking at it. Because when I was in England, I did not enjoy the kind of status that I enjoy here as an Indian woman of a certain stature. I don't have to follow a lot of things. I always say to my students that wearing hijab and wearing high heels to me is the same. It decides for me how I should look, what I should wear by someone else. And how do you make the difference between, why do you think hijab is more discriminatory than high heels? So, and I am able to, sitting here, make those kind of rampant statements because I am actually experiencing the best of both the worlds being in India, right? So I find it very funny when I go to UK and then I'm told by UK academics how I should think about women and feminism, and I laugh. What can I say? I don't want to fight. I'm in your country, I'm your guest, and as a good guest I just am going to smile, but I am actually in a better place, really speaking, because as we age, Asian patriarchies allow us to actually enjoy far more freedom. We don't have to remain young and beautiful. We just can expand bodily and in stature, and we enjoy far more freedom and far more authority. And we are not challenged all the time the way I would have been if I was in UK as a woman and as a woman of color. So I do see all of this that you are saying. I'm just expanding on what your points of concern are, that when we are thinking of women or the world from Buddhist point of view, it's different from the Western Christian Roman point of view. Similarly with Islam, Islam constantly maligned, Hinduism constantly maligned in the Western hemisphere. It does not work like that. So I mean, do you want to say something?
Just one point, Sameena. I know also I think Bhutan is associated with the gross national happiness philosophy.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think we have a commission dedicated to that called the Gross National Happiness Commission. And not the laws, but I think it's not specific to laws, but all the government policies by the ministries and departments, and even the law school. We have to do a GNA screening of all the policies, so that not specifically trying to really iron out the differences between men and women, but I think we are all sentient beings. We all love to be happy and content. So therefore, I think all policies, by extension, rules and regulations, definitely be responsive to the happiness of all sentient beings. So as you're right. So, we are trying to ensure
goals itself are defined differently, and it's not equality always. We also say that Islamic feminism also has pointed this out, that the goal itself is not of achieving equality with men, because they are not actually better off than us. So I always used to say, but I don't want to be equal to men. We are anyways ahead of them. So they are trying so hard to get to our position. We are able to manage so many things. So that is, I'm going to come to Donna. I think we have last 3 minutes and I think on her face, I see a story. So she wants to share a story of a student. So maybe we'll go to you, Donna. And if after her, if anybody wants to say something in a minute or two, we will go to any of our panelists. Yes, please.
You know, Sameena, I really don't have a story of any particular student, I'm afraid.
I was just hoping.
No, well, I mean, one of the things I'm learning as a dean, so I was an academic and now I'm an administrator, and I had never come to administration before. So all of my relationships with my students have been as a professor, and I taught courses on gender discrimination and gender and work. I taught courses on rape culture. And my relationship with my students was such that I was constantly learning from my students. That I think we're in such an amazing profession in ways, because we you know, it's just not true that we are the ones that are imparting knowledge. We are, you know, we are absorbing knowledge as we impart. And so I don't really have anything about any particular student, but I do want to say that my students in their various backgrounds and their various experiences have made the law richer to me. I'm not a practitioner, right? I'm a professor, and they've made it more rich and meaningful, and they've given it content in a way that I'm not sure I would ever otherwise have imagined in any other profession. So you know, I'm great. Again, I'm grateful to my students. I think all of our students are really, they're going to change the world, right? The world needs a lot of change, and I think our generation of students is going to do. And I'm just impressed. I'm just super impressed with them.
Thank you, Donna. I always start my newspaper articles in the class. They point something new to me, because I am not on any social media or on TV. They point out something, and then we start discussing that. It becomes a short article. It is always the case that without students, how will I write? I feel if I'm on sabbatical, there is nothing happening in life. So it is the students that drive us to feel hope, to feel anger, to feel everything that is needed for this profession. Does anyone, Managay or Trish, do you want to come in and say anything?
No, thank you, Seema. I beg your pardon, Sameena, for the opportunity. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with something, but I think I'll just hold on for a moment and allow anybody else who wants to speak to articulate their views. Thank you.
No, thank you. Other than it's been a fantastic panel, I've really loved the loved the conversation, and thank you, Sameena, for being a wonderful host of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please feel free to share your comment, Managay. Yeah.
I think we may be out of time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, but we are running on Indian Standard Time. So I am going to say to my participants and the people who are listening in to us that please stay tuned, because the next session will start at 12:30, and that will be as exciting, hopefully, as ours was. Please continue to attend the conference. Thank you so much. And then, Managay, if you want to speak, please go on. The participants are welcome to stay on, but we are here.
Thank you, Sameena. I think just one thing that is making me a bit uncomfortable emanates from some of the comments that have been made in response to the questions. I'm referring in particular to Professor Dorjee's answer to the question that were posed. I'm trying not to be controversial about the way I articulate what I want to say, but I think I would have been a little bit more comfortable had those comments come from some of the people that he purported to speak on behalf of. And not from a man, let's put it that way. What I'm also a little bit uncomfortable with is that very often we find culture and religion being used as a mechanism to justify discriminatory practices. And those of us, women themselves are guilty of doing that because we're so inculcated with the dogma and the propaganda of our cultures and our religion that we lose a sense of objectivity in our approach to what it is about the culture or the religion that may be advancing discriminatory practices of which we are the victims ourselves. And then the other aspect that also makes me a little bit uncomfortable, and I put myself in this category as well, is that I think all of us are speaking from positions of privilege. And as a result, we talk of our personal experiences through that lens. And I know from research done in my own country what the lived experience of the women are in South Africa. We have one of the most advanced constitutions, which gives everybody, I'm taking account of the intersectionality aspects here, but our constitution grants everybody rights which are just unbelievable in terms of the expansiveness. And it's very similar, I think, to the Canadian constitution in many ways. But the experience of women doesn't translate into recognition that these rights actually exist. And that is because of cultural norms and religious norms and patriarchy and various other aspects of life in South Africa, which actually punish women, in fact, for the advances that the law is making or allowing them to make or permitting them to make. I'll give you an example of women who may achieve high positions in their places of employment. There is, because of very strong patriarchal views and because of the threat that this poses to men, to the way they view themselves, these women may be able to practice their profession with great freedom in wherever it is that they're doing it, but their experience at home is quite different. If you have a husband who isn't occupying a similarly high level position, your experience at home is that you are in some ways sabotaged, you are diminished, you are brought down to the level that your husband may be occupying in his daily life at work. And similarly, where women have men who work under them, there is a certain resistance to what they're doing, to how they're being perceived, and to what they expect of their employees. There's a subtle sabotage of women's efforts. So the problem is that although we have these rights and we have very good legislation, which puts in place various provisions for women to soar, or for people to soar and to enjoy their human rights, we find that the experience of particularly women who are not at the same level of privilege to be able to assert themselves is slightly different. So I just thought I'd make those few points, which do give me a sense of discomfort. Thank you.
Professor Reddi, I think there is no controversy in what you said and what was said before, but, and I am a very controversial person. So believe me if I'm actually saying that these are, I think just what was said, that from Asia, the experiences may be different. They are all of patriarchy and of serious discrimination. It's just that the point of vantage points are different, and what may be experienced as feminism may be different. That's all. But the starting points are different and the experiences are different. So we may not be able to judge what is happening here from someone else's point of view. That is not to deny. Can I deny India has patriarchy? Then I will have no profession. So obviously there is. But the point of differences are not noticed by people who are making comments about India sitting abroad. That is all there is. Obviously, there is severe patriarchy, and we know that there is nothing that can be hidden, especially of a place like huge and so open as India. About Bhutan, though, since none of us have visited, I also felt that maybe its a vantage point is different. They think of happiness. Someone else thinks of equality. Someone else thinks of Amartya Sen thinks of freedom. So people are thinking of human potential in different ways. That was all. And so what you said is all taken in that spirit, that I think all of us agree with what you said in your first round and in your second round, and are most grateful for your comments and cognizant of what you have pointed out here. So thank you so much.